For me, the 19th century Austrian poet, Marie Reiner Rilke, his poetry exquisitely reflects his yearning for spiritual connection and his challenge of being in a body. It was a privilege to set this poem circling to music and to sing it. The translation from German is from the poet Robert Bly.
I live my life in growing orbits that move out of the things of the world. Perhaps I can never achieve the last, but that will be my attempt. I am circling, circling round God. I am circling, circling round God. And I've been circling for 1,000 years, and I've been circling for 1,000 years. I am circling around God, around the ancient tower. I have been circling for 1,000 years, and I still don't know if I'm a falcon or a storm or a great sun.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Jean Nemitz, and I'm the Director of Religious Education here at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. As always, thank you to the team that helps bring us Sunday services each week. For over a century, the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood has been gathering in community as a home for liberal faith and free thinking. For the last year, USR has been meeting online just like this. And still, this community we build, for the moment virtually, offers the world a place where each person, whatever their gender, sexual orientation, age, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status, physical or mental health, body or theology, is embraced with love. Here we believe in the interdependence of humanity, in the power of love, and in the holy spark in each person. If this is your first time visiting, we are so glad you found us. Today, newcomers are welcome to join Reverend Sarah in a special coffee hour room. Instructions will follow at the end of the service. Also, if you'd like to learn more about us and get connected to our weekly emails, please fill out the Google form dropped into the chat or visit the website. You can also email our congregational administrator, Ann Peretti, at usr.membership1@gmail.com, and can also help those of you who have been coming for a while and are interested in becoming members. Just a few quick announcements. Tomorrow night at 7:30, we will be having a 1-year anniversary healing service. Poetry, music, reflection, and prayer will help us mark this 1-year anniversary. An email went out, and the link will also be in the daily Zoom email. An online memorial will be held for Steve Nelson next Saturday, March 20th at 11 a.m. We will send an email with the details of the Zoom room. Next Sunday, March 21st, we will be having another joint service with CUC of Paramus, a springtime service that will think about the way we move from one season of our living to another. And the service will offer time for joy, contemplation, and deepening. It will start at 10:15 to split the difference between our two congregation start times. We will send emails to remind you. And finally, we continue to collect diapers on Reed Porch this month of March. Keep them coming. They will be donated to institutions that support babies and their families. And we are so grateful for all your donations to help mitigate the harm of these challenging times. Again, we are so glad you are with us this morning.
Please join us in the words for lighting the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community.
Now come, take a deep breath, slow and easy. It has been 1 year. 1 year since I have been able to invite you into breathing together in person. Our breath mingling, tiny particles of ourselves carried on air, shared across distance, across time, as it has always been. A year of being apart, of breathing alone, of struggling to breathe, of learning new ways of being. It's been a long year, so take a deep breath and just be here, apart but together, breathing as one. Let the sound as it rings out remind you not of all that was lost, but of all the ways we have held together, all we have learned, all the hopes we still carry. Breathe and listen. Friends, we have arrived at this most inauspicious day, the 1-year mark of having closed the doors of our congregation, but not the embrace of our beloved community. 1 year ago, on March 15th, 2020, we held our first virtual service. You may remember for that first one, a handful of folks gathered in Anderson to make it happen. But by the second service, we were Zooming in from home, leaving only Ron and Kristen to be socially distant together at Anderson, making music in our beloved space, keeping it alive in our absence. It has indeed been a long year. Before it began, before that fateful weekend, we had spent our congregational year trying new things. The labyrinth we taped on the floor, the service at which we sat at round tables and spoke to one another, and so many other small and what felt then like big experiments that I can't perfectly bring to mind. What I do remember is that they all had the same purpose: to bring us closer together, to give us chances to be ourselves together, openly, deeply, vulnerably. This is the point of religious community: to grow and change and become ever more ourselves, but to do so alongside each other, creating strong and abiding ties that can withstand the trials of life and the tests of time. And who knew such a trial was in store? I have been so grateful and not surprised that the ties we have built, the honesty we have shared, the community we have created together has shown itself resilient. You have shown yourselves, we have shown ourselves resilient. And here we are, 1 year later, still a people gathered in commitment and with love. A people with new sorrows, but also new skills. A people with losses that cut to the bone, but a people with a renewed understanding of what it means to create, to persevere, to care, and to hope. And so on this 1 year anniversary, I want to actually say thank you. Thank you for all the ways that you live your values and have done through a pandemic, a historic election, and challenges that were beyond our imagining 12 months ago. Thank you for the grace you have shown each other and that you have also shown me as we have navigated this time facing collective and personal challenges. Kindness and compassion for all this trauma has been vital to our shared survival. Thank you for your continued presence, for being here with me and with each other on Sunday mornings. Perhaps more than ever, this time brings us together. In these hours, we continue the shared conversation we began 4 years ago, a conversation that I, for one, could not do without. Thank you for being here, for seeking after truth together, for opening your hearts and minds with us each Sunday, for claiming this time for yourselves and for all of us. Thank you. It is, as it is every Sunday, so good to be with you.
Good morning again. Today, I would like to share with you the lives of two men who both were devoted to Unitarian Universalism, each in their own way, and both named James. These two famous 20th century Unitarians were James Luther Adams, whose 5 smooth stones we heard about last week, born in 1901, and James Reeb, born in 1927. Both men were deeply devoted to a search of truth, and both followed their own paths. James Luther Adams helped define religious liberalism through his theological and scholarly work, and James Reeb really put those convictions into practice through social justice. James Luther Adams was the son of a fundamentalist preacher, and in college, he rejected his parents' rigid beliefs and frequently spoke out against religious fundamentalism. He continued to reject fundamentalism, but he was deeply interested in religious thought, and he found a home for his liberal ideas in Unitarianism. Adams became a leader among Unitarians. He was an influential speaker and teacher who was never afraid to challenge the status quo. He believed in certain bedrock truths, among them the idea that to be human is to be a member of a community. Freedom, justice, and virtue can exist only in relationship through human interaction. And we express our faith through the institutions we create, our religious communities, our schools, and our political and social organizations. In other words, true faith is not just what people say they believe in. People show true faith by their actions and the consequences that result from them. He believed we have a moral obligation to confront injustice, no matter what the cost. And he used the pulpit to speak out against injustice. In Nazi Germany, he worked with the underground church movement. As a result, the Nazis held and questioned him more than once, but they did release him. Our other James, James Reeb, is probably the best example of someone who followed Adams' teaching. Like Adams, Reeb grew up in a rigidly fundamentalist Christian home. He actually continued to embrace these views through high school, military service, and college, and sometimes he preached them publicly. He had a natural inclination to care about people in need and to want to help them. This essential quality would inform the course of his life in a devotional practice of social justice. After college, Reeb began studying to become a Presbyterian minister, but his studies, instead of deepening his faith, caused him to question his beliefs and his calling. When he completed his seminary training, he became the chaplain of a large inner city hospital, where his ideas about religion continued to evolve. He decided to leave the Presbyterian Church when he realized that he no longer believed in many of its doctrines. He was in despair about his career until he chanced to read a book by a Unitarian whose ideas agreed with his own vision of truth, and he immediately applied to become a Unitarian minister. All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. offered him a position as assistant minister, and he accepted it. He brought with him his message that the ultimate concern of religion must be the supreme worth and dignity of every human being. Aside from his work as a parish minister, Reeb was heavily involved in the community. By 1963, he realized that improving conditions in the inner city was his path. Although he was much loved as a minister, Reeb left his Unitarian ministry for a job in Boston, where he focused his efforts on fair housing. During this time, the civil rights movement was happening. One of its goals was to help the many Blacks who were unfairly denied the right to vote. Civil rights activists, especially in the South, were trying to convince Congress to pass a Voting Rights Act. One evening, Reeb and his wife saw an appalling sight on the TV. State police stopped nonviolent protesters who were marching from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. They attacked the innocent marchers with clubs and tear gas. The next day, Martin Luther King Jr. called for ministers from the North to join him and the marchers in Selma for another protest. And Reeb decided he must go. Thousands of marchers gathered in Selma, and the police again stopped them, although this time without violence. That evening, however, with tensions in Selma at a boiling point, 4 angry white men shouting racial insults attacked Reeb and 2 other ministers. One of them clubbed Reeb on the head, and he fell to the sidewalk unconscious. James Reeb never recovered from the spoke at James Reeb's funeral. That same day, Lyndon Johnson addressed Congress to introduce the Voting Rights Bill, which became law 5 months later. Was James Reeb's belief in social justice worth the price? According to his widow, yes, he, quote, thought the movement was worth any sacrifice. So in the legacy of the 2 James, we have 2 persons who devoted their lives, one by clarifying the identity of religious liberalism and calling for the integration of belief and practice as a spiritual mandate, and the other walking the talk of creating communities of love through social justice. Postscript. James Reeb's name may sound familiar. Reeb House here at USR. And I would like to think that we are carrying out his devotional path of social justice by our reinvention of giving during this pandemic times, our monthly Reeb Porch Giving.
Good morning. Today, we're marking the passage of an extraordinary year. It's been a time of great change and great sacrifice. And sacrifice is a type of giving. We ask that you give generously to support everything that USR has meant to you, especially during this past year. Maybe you have a little extra cash due to canceled vacation plans or inability to go out to dinner. Maybe you saved money on your cut rate Zoom meeting wardrobe. Whatever the case may be, you're going to see on your screen different ways that you're able to give. And please know that whatever you give will be gratefully accepted by the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. So thank you for giving generously.
Our first reading is from an article that was printed in The Atlantic on March 8th of this year by Ellen Cushing, entitled "Late Stage Pandemic is Messing with Your Brain." I first became aware that I was losing my mind in late December. It was a Friday night, the start of my 40-something pandemic week. Hours and hours with no work to distract me and outside temperatures prohibitive of anything other than staying in. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to fill the time. What did I used to do on the weekends? I asked my boyfriend like a soap opera amnesiac. He couldn't really remember either. This is the fog of late pandemic, and it's brutal. In the spring, we joked about the times before, but they were still within reach, easily accessible in our shorter term memories. In the summer and fall, with restrictions loosening and temperatures rising, we were able to replicate some of what life used to be like, at least in an adulterated form, outdoor drinks or a day at the beach. But now, in the cold, dark, featureless middle of our pandemic winter, we can neither remember what life was like before, nor imagine what it will be like after. And to some degree, this is a natural adaptation. The sunniest optimist would point out that all of this forgetting is evidence of the resilience of our species. Humans forget a great deal of what happens to us, and we tend to do it pretty quickly after the first 24 hours or so. Our brains are very good at learning different things and forgetting the things that are not a priority. Tina Franklin, a neuroscientist at Georgia Tech, told me. As the pandemic has taught us new habits and made old ones obsolete, our brains have essentially put actions like taking the bus or going to restaurants into deep storage and placed social distancing and coughing into our elbows near the front of the closet. When our habits change back, presumably so will our recall. We're all walking around with some mild cognitive imperative, said Mike Yassa, a neuroscientist at UC Irvine, quote, based on everything we know about the brain, two of the things that are really good for it are physical activity and novelty. A thing that's very bad for it is chronic and perpetual stress. Living through a pandemic, even for those who are doing so in relative comfort, quote, is exposing people to microdoses of unpredictable stress all the time, said Franklin, whose research has shown that stress changes the brain regions that control executive functioning, learning, and memory. That stress doesn't necessarily feel like a panic attack or a bender or a sleepless night, though of course it can. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. It's like a heaviness, like you're waking up to more of the same and it's never going to change, George told me when I asked her what her pandemic anxiety felt like wading through something thicker than water, maybe a tar pit. She misses the sound of voices. I have a job that allows me to work from home, an immune system and a set of neurotransmitters that tend to function pretty well, a support network, a savings account, decent Wi-Fi, plenty of hand sanitizer. I have experienced the pandemic from a position of obscene privilege, and on any given day, I'd rank my mental health somewhere north of fine. And yet I feel like I have spent the past year being pushed through a pasta extruder. I wake up groggy and spend every day moving from the couch to the dining room table to the bed and back. At some point, night falls, and at some point after that, I close work-related browser windows and open leisure-related ones. Some Saturdays, not too long from now, I will go to a party or a bar or even a wedding. Maybe I'll hold a baby and maybe it will be heavy. Inevitably, I will kick off my shoes at some point. I won't have to wonder what I do on the weekends because I'll be doing it. I'll kiss my friends and try their drinks and marvel at how everyone is still the same, but a little different after the year we all had. My brain won't be smooth anymore, but being wrinkly won't feel so bad. My synapses will be made plastic by the complicated, strange, utterly novel experience of being alive again, human again. I can't wait.
Every Sunday, we take time in our service to bear witness to each other's lives, to the movements of the world at large. Even though we are apart, we can offer each other a safe place to breathe and to reflect, to meditate and to pray. And we come into that time together now. And today we begin with a song titled Where Do We Come From? We're singing it every Sunday this month. Join in the singing if you wish, or go ahead and begin to take slow and deep breaths.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery. What are we? Life is a cradle we going. Mystery. Mystery. What are we? Life is a cradle we going. Where do we come from? Mystery. What are we? Life is a cradle we going. Where do we come from? Life is a cradle we going.
Breathe in slowly through your nose and exhale slowly from your mouth. With each breath that moves in and out of your body, remember that your unique and singular being belongs to the vastness of creation, the wide array of existence that moves through time and space. Breathe. Breathe. Where do we come from? From disparate backgrounds, from families that held us and ones that hurt us, from countries scattered around this great planet, from joy and celebration, from long nights and lonely days, from grief and pain, from love and gentleness, from fear and despair and wonder and hope and imagination, from God and no God, from music and poetry and beauty and possibility. These human lives of ours are born and shaped and guided by things we comprehend and things beyond our knowing, by memories and stories we tell and dreams we dream. Take a deep breath. What are we? We are stardust and water and energy and light. We are wholly human and wholly sacred. We are beloved and loving. We are bold and courageous. We are worried and afraid. We are determined. We are unique, and yet we are just one in billions. We are mortal, and our stories never die. We are what our DNA instructs. We are the choices we make. We humans are so very different, and yet we share so much in spite of variations in language, bodies, culture, nations, in our cells, in our needs, in our hopes, and in our fears we share. Take a deep breath. Where are we going? Where are we going? It is a mystery. One yet to be written, yet to be discovered, never to be solved. Life is a riddle and a mystery, and living is a journey of uncovering, of imagining and creating and building and growing, of breathing in and out each day, of finding what matters and holding on tight, of dwelling in the mystery, being open to the riddle. There's no one right way to live, no single right way to be. There is only centering, compassion and justice, community and love, and being open to the changing world. Breathe. When you feel adrift with no roots, may you remember that sharing your story will help you plant deep in the soil on which you find yourself. Even when you question your own solidity, may you remember that you are anchored in our shared humanity across space and time. Even when you have more questions than answers, may you know the peace of living into the mystery, the peace of loving deeply, the peace of breathing slowly. So may it be.
Our second reading today is a poem by Miguel de Unamuno, Throw Yourself Like Seed. Shake off the sadness and recover your spirit. Sluggish, you will never see the wheel of fate that brushes your heel as it turns going by. The man who wants to live is the man in whom life is abundant. Now you are only giving food to that final pain, which is slowly winding in you in the nets of death. But to live is to work, and the only thing which lasts is the work. Start then, turn to the work. Throw yourself like a seed as you walk and into your own field. Don't turn your face, for that would be to turn it to death. And do not let the past weigh down your motion. Leave what's alive in the furrow, what's dead in yourself. For life does not move in the same way as a group of clouds. From your work, you will be able one day to gather yourself.
give sigh for sigh. I'll not leave thee now, lying on the stair, sings the lovely sleeping. Go sleep thou with them. Most kindly I scatter my leaves where thy mates of garden, thy senseless and dead. So soon may I follow when friendships decay, and from love's shining circle the gems drop away. When true hearts lie withered, and from bonds is
A year ago, we made the challenging decision to close the doors of our building. I remember that leading up to the choice, emails and calls were flying fast and furious. And the decision was made on fact and intuition and with the advice of people we trust. And I remember that in that first moment, that first week, not everyone understood, not everyone was happy. But we did it, and we pivoted, adapting, learning new skills that helped us keep our services running and helped us build up new programs online. And we did it all with no idea of how long it would go on. And now here we are, a full year later. We've been at this pandemic living for 12 whole months. What does it all mean? And as we look toward the hope inherent in the vaccines that are finally rolling out with some measure of speed, what comes next? When I read that piece from The Atlantic about late-stage pandemic effects, I nearly cried at how seen I felt. I have been forgetting things left and right. Some of you know that firsthand. I schedule something, I write it down, then I forget to look at the place I wrote it down, and poof, in comes an email wondering if I'm okay because I haven't joined a meeting yet. I wake up with that extruded pasta feeling she writes about, forget about how I feel by the end of the day. And I'm not unique in this, as evidenced by that essay. Honestly, part of me just wanted to read you the whole thing and then be like, right? And have that be the sermon. I'm guessing that many of you will recognize yourselves here too, trying to remember what we did before, what life was like, all those little daily things that we used to do as a matter of course that seem lifetimes ago now. They've been replaced by other ways of being. My entire family almost never leaves the house without a mask on. We don't forget anymore. My children, who never before cared about sanitizing, are now deeply committed to its value. My oldest has learned to do school sitting apart from his friends, and my youngers have sort of learned to learn online. All of us have learned to give room to other folks on the street and on lines. Just as Cushing says in her essay, we have put old knowledge into deep storage, and we've replaced it with the survival knowledge that we need right now. This capacity to adapt to change is such an incredible human quality. It might hurt while we do it. It might pain us to have lost sight of all that we once were and once did, but the fact that we can do it is actually quite marvelous. And I do also believe that in addition to gaining survival knowledge of Zoom and how germs spread and how vaccines function and what masks are right for what situation and how to estimate 6 feet, we've also learned many other things, many other things. In amongst all the challenge and the survival knowledge, there has been wisdom on offer, wisdom that we can keep. In those early days, we were figuring things out and there were mistakes galore, and there still are mistakes. And yet, in those mistakes, there has been such compassion and grace. I've thought to myself many times in the last 12 months that if we could all offer to each other the grace of COVID times all the time, how different might the world be? We need that grace and compassion right now, as 12 months of living with unpredictable stress leaves our brains a bit foggy. Our collective need for kindness, maybe for lower expectations than we had come to believe was normal, for forgiveness. Our collective need for these things has been laid plain by the pandemic, and we can choose to carry forward the wisdom of offering each other these things more often. It's also come clear to us the ways that our economic and educational systems are tied to public health. We've seen just how clearly linked public education is with women's ability to work and how that is tied to a functioning economy. We have seen clearly that we live in a system that asks us to work ourselves to the bone and requires us to martyr ourselves to progress and production. Even those of us who live with privilege, if we have paid attention, cannot have failed to see this playing out all around us as essential workers are offered as sacrifice, even as they are paid a wage that was barely a living one 40 years ago. There is wisdom we have learned about the value of offering healthcare to all, of untangling the web of capitalism and misogyny and corrupt government and greed. It's wisdom we can choose to carry forward. Early in the pandemic, when the world slowed to a crawl, we watched as Earth healed some of its wounds. With our airplanes stuck on runways, our cars parked in garages, our bodies inside consuming less, a quietness came, the kind of quietness that helps heal. Surely we have re-injured our planet by this stage of the pandemic, but for a shining moment, Earth was able to soothe itself because we stayed still. Animals roamed, pollution cleared, Gaia could breathe. We learned what many knew. And if we can get out of the way, Earth has the means to become whole. There is wisdom we could choose to carry forward. And right here in this congregation, we have learned again how important presence, commitment, and community are. We've remembered that there's value in journeying alongside each other. We have remembered that something special happens because we stay together, talk together, reflect together, engage together in routine as well as novelty. Throughout the pandemic, we have had occasion to take care of each other. Ongoing checks on our most vulnerable, acute attention paid to those struggling now, and the constant and consistent offer of companionship. We have been reminded over and over these past 12 months of ancient wisdom that teaches us that our human living is best done in community, with opportunities to make meaning together of challenges and grief and joy. In the wake of last week's service, thinking about who we are as Unitarian Universalists and who we can be moving into the future, I've been thinking a lot about wisdom, how it's passed down, by whom, when we choose to let go of lessons of the past, and why. Our story of the two James touches on this. Whose wisdom do we choose to inherit, and how do we put it into practice? One of the things I know is that wisdom has the potential to be found anywhere. In the budding sprout just pushing through the soil, in the muddy rains and the waves of the ocean, in the offhand remark of a child, in the words of that infuriating person we struggle to love, and even in the midst of a pandemic. Some dispensed wisdom goes unnoticed, some is lost to time, and some is retained across millennia. Although untold numbers of creations are gone, never to be recovered, we have held fast to some of our known philosophers, founders of religion, scientists, poets, artists. We've held fast to their works because they offer us a chance to live better in the world. Amongst those creations that attempt to explain the human journey are works of Scripture. We Unitarian Universalists recognize Scripture from the world's religions as a source of potential wisdom. And this week, as I have considered what it means to hit the 1-year mark, I've been thinking about a particular passage from the Gospel of Matthew. It comes from book 13, verses 1-9. You may know it as the parable of the sower. It reads, "That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear." Throughout the scriptures, Jesus dispenses wisdom in the form of these parables, small stories, slice of life vignettes he uses to illustrate much grander points about human life. And this one got stuck in my head this week, along with that Miguel de Unamuno poem that asks us to throw ourselves like seed. Throw yourself out like seed onto fertile ground. Those seeds, if they land right, will grow into nourishment and beauty for generations. Jesus speaks to the wisdom of knowing which seeds to throw and where. And De Unamuno asks us to shake off the past, walk into the field and scatter the seeds, scatter ourselves in the work of living, of justice, of moving into the future. Only in scattering, he writes, will we begin to gather ourselves once more. Like many of you, I am in the stages of vaccination. I'm between the first and the second shot. I watch the news some days when I can stomach it, and I check the numbers to see what percentage of my state and my area has been vaccinated. And I think about when I will feel comfortable doing which things. And I think about when schools will be fully open, and I meet with our safety team and I talk about what reopening our space might look like. I have told you before how much I want to see your faces, hear your voices, hug you. And I am aware that 12 months into this pandemic life we have all been living, I have developed new habits, new fears. I don't know when I'll feel prepared to scatter myself in the old ways. The survival knowledge, the low grade constant stress, the trauma of grief and loss won't just turn off 2 weeks after I receive my second dose. Yes, I'm sure, as Cushing notes, our recall will come back and gradually we'll find our way, but it won't be so simple. We've learned to do things differently, to scatter ourselves from home in smaller circles than before. We've learned to throw ourselves into work and community building in a different kind of way. And when we're asked to go back to the old ways, we'll have to contend with our fears, also with our desires for what the world could yet be. We will have the chance to arm ourselves with our new wisdom. What will we choose to carry forward? Grace and compassion? Commitment to communities of care? A promise to travel less in order to reduce our carbon footprint? What seeds will we choose to scatter? What of ourselves will we be willing to give? The central question of this morning's service is what comes next? And not for nothing, we are singing all month a song that declares, in the face of the questions, where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? It declares life is a riddle and a mystery. What comes next may not be a riddle, but it is, for now, a mystery. Yet it is one that we can write. It will not, or at least it need not, be imposed from outside. We can choose, we can decide what comes next. One of the great lessons of the pandemic is that with a good enough reason, we can radically change the way that we live, all of us. Whether that means staying home more than going out, or changing the way we consume, or changing the frequency and way that we travel, or changing our systems and our culture, we humans can adapt if we decide that we want to. So what wisdom will we carry forward, and in what ways will that cause us to adapt? I hope that as you go into your coffee hour rooms this morning, that you will talk about this together, that you will talk about what wisdom you have learned in these past 12 months, what you will carry forward, what you hope we will be, what you hope comes next, what it is that you are willing to work to ensure comes next. For my part, one lesson of the pandemic so far is that I definitely was right not to become an elementary school teacher. That is one good lesson. But more profoundly, the lessons have been that human resilience is real, and so is the human desire to see each other through, to see each other thrive. Grace is real, and it's not something given from above, but something that we offer to each other right here, right now. When we emerge from this winter, from this pandemic, as we slowly break through the fears and paralyzations of this time, I hope that we bring forward a renewed commitment to justice that privileges community and care, grace and mercy, kindness and love. I hope that those are the seeds we scatter, and that each of us, on our own timelines and in our own ways, throws ourselves back into this world we share, working ever to plant seeds born from the wisdom we have learned, seeds that will provide as we move into the mystery that is the future. I offer you this poem by Laura Kelly Fanucci to close our sermon this morning. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger. Full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hoped to be. And may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. So may it be.
Please join in our hymn, Rising Green, number 1068 in the Teal Hymnal. My blood doth rise in the roots of yon oak, her sap doth run in my veins, boundless my soul like the open sky, Please join us in the words for extinguishing the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.